I was sitting on my couch, half-heartedly scrolling through my phone, when a notification popped up that made my stomach drop. It was a text from Mom, short and sharp. "We need to talk. You can't hide things from us forever." My chest tightened, a mix of dread and simmering anger rising instantly. How did she even find out? I had been careful, quiet about my promotion, the raise, the savings I'd finally managed to build. The idea that she somehow knew made my skin crawl. And then I remembered my brother, spoiled, entitled, always thinking the world owed him something. They had no idea who they were messing with. I paced the apartment, my mind racing through every interaction, every slip that could have led to this. My phone buzzed again. Another message, vague, demanding. I clenched my fists, swallowing hard, trying to steady my breathing. This wasn't going to be simple. I knew the storm was coming, and for once I wasn't going to back down. I remember growing up in a house where everything always seemed to tilt toward my brother. Birthdays were extravagant for him. New bikes, shiny gadgets, trips he never deserved, while I got hand-me-downs and half-hearted smiles. I tried to speak up, to ask for the simplest acknowledgement, but it was always dismissed. "He needs it more," they'd say, like my existence was secondary. Every allowance he received, every praise from teachers or relatives, felt like a reminder that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough. I worked silently, saving whatever I could from part-time jobs, dreaming of a life where I mattered on my own terms. The resentment simmered quietly, a dull ache I carried into adulthood. Now, looking back, I could see how those years had shaped me, teaching me patience, strategy, and the silent strength I never had permission to show. That favoritism, that constant undervaluing, was the soil where my determination had quietly grown, waiting for the day I could finally prove myself. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, making my heart skip. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there they were. Mom, perfectly composed as always, and my brother, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine, designer bag in hand and that smug grin plastered across his face. "Surprise," Mom said, her voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable edge. "We need to talk about your situation." My brother leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirking. "Wow," he said, scanning my modest living room. Not exactly what I expected from someone making a big salary. Kind of underwhelming, don't you think? I felt my jaw tighten, anger bubbling under the surface. Mom's eyes glimmered, calculating, her smile that tight-lipped version I'd learned to dread. "We just want to make sure everything's shared properly," she added, venom masked by politeness. I forced a smile, heart hammering. Every word, every gesture screamed entitlement, manipulation, and condescension. I reminded myself silently, don't react too soon. Let them show their cards. They had no idea the storm they'd just walked into. Mom didn't waste any time. She stepped forward, voice firm and unyielding. "You're doing well now, aren't you? I think it's only fair you help out. Start with something substantial." My stomach sank. She didn't ask politely. She demanded. My brother chimed in, smirking. "Yeah, come on. Make it worth our time." Anger flared, but I forced myself to stay composed, recalling every family dinner where my efforts were ignored, every holiday I worked overtime while they celebrated his victories. I remembered lending my paycheck to cover his school fees without so much as a thank you. I gritted my teeth, heart racing, caught between polite deflection and the fury that had been simmering for years. I felt the weight of every unnoticed sacrifice pressing down on me. And then, just for a fleeting moment, a thought crossed my mind. A plan, subtle, a way to shift the balance. They were expecting obedience. They had no idea the first power reversal was about to unfold, and I could almost smile at the anticipation. Mom's voice softened, almost tender, but I knew the trap. "I raised you, didn't I? Don't you owe me something for all I've done?" My chest tightened. Every word felt heavy, dripping with obligation and guilt she'd wielded since childhood. I remembered the countless nights I stayed up, studying while she praised my brother's antics. The humiliations came flooding back. Being laughed at for asking for a little help, being ignored at family gatherings, having my achievements dismissed as not enough. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug as I weighed my options. Comply and let the familiar shame settle in, or resist and risk the confrontation escalating. My mind raced. The FOMO gnawed at me, the fear of being cast out, rejected, or labeled ungrateful. But beneath it all, a quiet anger burned. I wasn't that scared little kid anymore. I realized she had overplayed her hand. For the first time, I truly considered standing my ground, imagining the shock on her face when I refused. My brother's smirk widened, eyes scanning the modest apartment like he was inspecting a museum exhibit. "So this is what you've done with all that money? Cozy little nest, huh?" His voice dripped with condescension, each word a reminder of how little he thought of me. I felt the old sting of being underestimated, the years of silent effort dismissed as insignificant. But now, sitting across from him, I noticed the subtle cracks in his confidence. I had a steady job, savings, and the freedom he'd never earned, while he still relied on my mother's handouts and connections. I leaned back, letting the contrast sink in, letting him realize that the weak sibling he'd mocked for years had quietly built a life he couldn't even fathom. Tension coiled in the room like a spring ready to snap. My mind raced, plotting the first moves of a reversal he would never see coming. The arrogance, the entitlement, it all set the stage perfectly. This was just the calm before the storm, and they had no idea how it was about to hit. The room felt smaller somehow, every word from Mom and my brother pressing against me like a weight I could no longer bear. "We just think it's only fair," Mom started, but I stopped listening to the polite tones, the manipulative smiles, the entitlement dripping from my brother's every gesture. Something inside me snapped. Years of being ignored, belittled, and taken for granted surged to the surface. I realized I didn't owe them anything. Not my money, not my approval, not my compliance. I had built this life with sweat, patience, and silent determination. My heart pounded as a wave of clarity washed over me. I was done being exploited. I pictured every past humiliation, every time I'd been dismissed, and for the first time I felt a quiet triumph. A new sense of self-worth bloomed inside me, fierce and unyielding. The tension hung heavy, thick with anticipation. I knew I had to act, but what I would do next, even they couldn't guess. I took a slow, measured breath, letting a small, polite smile curl on my lips. "Of course I understand," I said, nodding as Mom and my brother leaned in, expecting compliance. Every word was deliberate, a calculated lull before the storm. I asked a few questions, pretending uncertainty, letting them feel the illusion of control. My mind raced, noting every phrase, every smug glance from my brother, every subtle manipulation from Mom. Each detail was a seed I would later use against them, tiny threads of their arrogance and entitlement I could weave into their eventual humiliation. "I'll see what I can do," I added casually, allowing the suggestion of cooperation to settle over them. Inside, I was already planning the reversal, imagining the moment when the favor they assumed they were owed would backfire spectacularly. The air in the room felt different now, electric with tension. They thought I was submissive, pliable, predictable, but underneath, the first hints of justice were quietly taking root. I took a deep breath, letting the polite mask slip just enough to reveal the steel underneath. "No," I said firmly, each syllable deliberate. "I'm not giving you anything. Not now, not ever." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mom froze, her composure cracking for the first time, eyes widening as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. My brother's jaw tightened, a flash of panic crossing his smug face. "What do you mean, no?" he barked, trying to regain control, but I didn't flinch. I could feel years of resentment and overlooked effort finally consolidating into something tangible. Power, clarity, dignity. I wasn't the scared child they had manipulated anymore. I leaned back, letting my calm confidence fill the space, letting them feel the shock of my defiance. This wasn't just a refusal. It was the first taste of the justice they'd never expected. Satisfaction coursed through me as I watched their faces, imagining the realization dawning. The little sibling they'd underestimated had finally taken control. I let a slow smile spread across my face, careful to keep my tone casual. "Funny you mention help," I said, reaching for a folder I'd left on the table. My brother's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" he asked, voice sharp, suspicion creeping in. I opened it deliberately, letting the papers peek out. Legal notices and bank statements showing joint accounts and charitable donations he'd assumed were untouched. "I just wanted to make sure you remembered how much you've benefited from my choices," I added lightly. Mom's face paled, realizing the implications, the subtle public exposure of years of entitlement. I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the evidence and implications settle in. "And just so you know," I continued, "I've invited a few people over later. They'll want to see how things are handled." My brother's smug confidence faltered, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of panic. The shock registered slowly, like a stone dropping in a still pond. For the first time, I watched them grasp that the tables had turned. Mom's composure shattered completely, her carefully curated facade crumbling as the implications of my reveal sank in. My brother stammered, trying to recover, but every word felt weak, hollow, and ineffective. I didn't think," he began, only to be cut off by the weight of the documents and the casual mention of witnesses arriving. I could see the realization in their eyes, the dawning understanding that their entitlement had finally collided with consequences. "Funny, isn't it?" I said softly, letting the words linger. "All those times you thought you could belittle me, dismiss me, and take what you wanted. Turns out, the one you underestimated had the last laugh." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, my brother's shoulders slumping. I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. Not cruel, just deserved. The balance had shifted, and the justice was palpable. For the first time in years, I felt seen, validated, and fully in control, while they faced the embarrassment they had earned. After they left, the apartment felt unusually still, the tension finally dissipating. I sank into the couch, letting my body relax for the first time in hours, letting the adrenaline ebb. I thought back to all the years I had spent shrinking, bending, and apologizing for simply existing in a family that never acknowledged my worth. I remembered the lonely nights working to support myself, the countless times I had swallowed pride while my brother was praised for the smallest things. Now, sitting here, I felt a profound contrast between that powerless past and the confidence I held in the present. I had set boundaries, asserted myself, and faced them without fear. I was financially independent, emotionally grounded, and finally free from the manipulations that had haunted me for so long. A quiet pride settled in my chest, mingled with relief. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval, or their money, to validate who I was. I was enough. I had always been enough. Mom finally turned away. The sharp edge in her eyes softened slightly, though the tension between us remained unbroken. She left without another word, taking my brother with her, leaving behind the quiet echo of entitlement and disappointment. I closed the door slowly, feeling the weight of years of manipulation lift slightly, replaced by a calm sense of satisfaction. The relationship wasn't healed, far from it, but for the first time, I had set firm boundaries, made my voice heard, and refused to be a pawn in their games. I sank into the couch, reflecting on how far I had come, on the strength it took to stand my ground, on the lessons learned from all those years of being overlooked. I smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and resolve, knowing that while the past couldn't be changed, my future belonged entirely to me. For once, the emotional ledger was balanced, and I could breathe freely, sitting alone in the quiet. I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The years of being ignored, the countless sacrifices no one acknowledged, the constant favoritism that made me question my worth. But now, I understood something vital. Self-respect isn't something others give you. It's something you claim for yourself. Entitlement, arrogance, and manipulation carry consequences, and those who assume they can take without giving will eventually face the mirror of reality. I had learned to navigate pain with patience, to build quietly while the world underestimated me, and to recognize my own value without needing anyone's approval. Looking back, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and reflection, vindication for the injustices I endured, yet a recognition that growth comes from patience, courage, and clarity. The experience had strengthened me, shaped me, and ultimately freed me. I knew the story would stay with me. A reminder that boundaries matter, justice can be earned, and personal growth is the greatest revenge of all.